CNN reported Navy Federal Credit Union approved 75% of its white applicants who applied for a conventional home mortgage, while only approving less than 50% of black applicants who applied for the same loan. Marvin, let's jump right into what's going on at Navy Federal and our experience, what happened with us when we applied for a home mortgage loan.
Yeah, this story is gaining a lot of traction. It's on a lot of YouTube channels. And what it is, it was a guy named Bob in Dallas that got pre-approved with Navy Federal, had a 700 credit score, had $100,000 to put down, had recently sold his house, and was ready to buy this house, had more than 20% down. So he got a pre-approval letter from Navy, and then 2 weeks before his closing, they denied him.
Well, let's also hit this point, Marvin.
Okay.
Bob also was the CEO of his own company. And when you're self-employed, you're getting a little bit more scrutiny than normal.
Yeah, you're right. That could cause a problem. You know, traditionally, all self-employed people have a harder time getting approved than, say, a person that's a regular employee or a W-2 employee. So you're right.
Most definitely. So let's jump right into what we experienced, because both of us are self-employed.
Yeah.
So we went through the process a few years ago.
Yeah, you know what I think it is? A lot of times when you're self-employed, you write off all your income so you don't have to pay taxes.
Most definitely.
So I think, you know, we don't know the story behind Bob, all the details, because they can't publish his credit score and his financials, of course. But if you're self-employed, be careful on how you do your taxes, because I believe that could have caused a role in this. And the second thing I'd like to touch on, Gloria, maybe it's all about credit score.
Maybe so. And, you know, statistics show, Marvin, that we are at the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to credit and understanding credit.
Yeah. And you got a lot of YouTube channels out here trying to promote, you know, financial literacy and repairing your credit. But you know what, people? We have to take our power back and learn more about our credit, because we can be discriminated upon. I've faced discrimination before, but we got to sit down and be accountable for what we can do better as well.
And it also goes back to, we talk about this all the time, Marvin, building a relationship with the bank.
Yeah.
Navy Federal is the largest credit union in the country, so everyone wants to jump on board. There's other credit unions out there that is just as good as Navy Federal, and that can get the job done as well.
And other banks. So, you know, a lot of people promote Navy Federal online, but look at the bank that you're with, the bank or credit union you've been banking with for years. It may be better for you to go with them to get your home mortgage, and always think about going with 3 different places. Get 3, you know, rate checks. Check your rate at 3 different banks or credit unions.
And Marvin, Bob was able to get his house closed on with another bank within 14 days. So we're going to jump right into telling you about our experience with Navy and how we were able to close our mortgage in 14 days as being self-employed.
And then you got to think, is there a problem? Why did Navy deny him? And then why did somebody else approve him within 14 days? But like Gloria said, we have our own personal story where we went to buy a house about 4 years ago, and we went through Navy. The real estate agent, remember, told us we need to close in 14 days. I thought that was kind of discriminatory, because I thought traditionally you have 30 days. So I told her, I said, look, I'm not writing a check. We got to check with the lender to see if they can close.
Most definitely. And during that process, we were a little bit discriminated against with the person who had the house listed, because they didn't think that we can afford it. They didn't know our situation. But they said, okay, guys, you have to close this house in 14 days. I'm like, where do they do that at?
That was the first time I ever heard of that.
Right. But Navy was able to come back and say, not a problem, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. So we were able to close a $500,000 house with a 101% loan, which Navy does offer that. And that's why a lot of people like going to Navy, because it's very attractive. And we submitted our documents and didn't have any problems at all closing our home with Navy. Over 700 credit score.
Yeah.
And because we're in the credit industry, you know, we took time out to make sure that our credit looked a certain way, you know, and that's very important, making sure you have all your I's dotted and your T's crossed.
Yeah.
I don't know what Bob's process was. I don't know if Bob's credit didn't look the way that it should look, but I do know that we didn't have any problems with Navy. We've been turned down before with Navy as well. We had our mortgage with Navy, several credit cards with Navy. Our income looked the way that it was supposed to look, and they turned us down for a car loan. Remember that, Marvin? And we had almost an 800 credit score, never missed a payment. We did not have a high income to debt ratio. And one of the things that Marvin and I have done over the years is we keep our credit separate.
Right.
So you can get the double whammy. And what I mean by that is, like, Marvin has 2 Navy Federal credit cards, one for $25,000 and one I think for $20,000. And I have my own credit card with Navy, and I have a $30,000 credit card and a $15,000 credit card and a $15,000 line of credit. So that way we both get double, because if we go and apply together, then there's only going to be one $25,000 credit limit. And keep in mind that Navy does have an internal banking score, which most banks have. So you want to make sure that the more products that you have with the institution and the more you do business with the institution, the more likely they are to approve you.
Yeah, and you got to remember, like Gloria said, in this story, they denied Bob for excessive obligations compared to income.
I was the CEO of my company, so I had a pretty good income.
But just 2 weeks before closing,
I got a denial. They sent me a letter saying, sorry, but your application has been denied.
So he was a business owner. So let's think about this. Was some of his business debts reporting on his personal credit? That could have been a factor. Also, just because you have a 700 score, which they said in this story, he had a 700 score, does that mean all 700s are created equally? Did he have a past mortgage? Which sounds like he did, because he said he paid off, he had just sold his house.
Yeah.
But what about the rest of his credit? Did he have credit cards? Were the credit cards close to the limit? Because you can't have a 700 credit score and have high balances. So when you're going for a mortgage, prepare yourself. You know, get your cards as close to zero as you can. You know, make sure everything is on time and you don't have a lot of inquiries. I would at least, like I said, check with at least 3 banks. And then, you know, I still want to see, is there a problem with Navy Federal? Because they had the widest gap of all the banks.
Most definitely. And the CFPB said that it does investigate stories like this.
Yeah, so if you guys have experienced any kind of discrimination, you can make a complaint with the CFPB or the Housing and Urban Development. Since 1968, when they passed the Fair Housing Act, we have the widest gap today between blacks and whites and Latinos and whites. We got to work on this, you guys. I think it has a lot to do with financial literacy. Glo, what about you?
Most definitely, Marvin. You know, it's very important that we understand, you know, we're not taught this in school.
Right.
So that's why we create these videos, so that we can give you information to empower your finances. It's very important for you to take time out and understand this, and also teach it to our kids, because this is how you create, you know, the knowledge and taking your power back, because there's no reason why as an African American you should be discriminated on with buying a home. That's one of the most important and major purchases you're going to buy in your life.
And I want you guys to comment below if you've experienced discrimination, and also comment below the things you've learned about credit. We got to get more involved in our community to help educate not only the people that are buying houses, but the next generation to come. Things like this will continue to affect us until we make some kind of change.
And while we're talking about financial literacy, reach out to Marvin and I. We have a book that we've written called The Psychology of Credit, and we'll be more than happy to send you a free digital copy. Comment below. Tell us your experience with Navy or any other bank where you may have felt discriminated against. Now, Marvin, while we're talking about this story, was Navy able to give a comment on what their feelings and their thoughts were on this article?
Navy commented that they're committed to equal and equitable treatment of all their members, but they really didn't say one way or the other, because they said it was information that they couldn't divulge, like the credit scores and the financials, to really prove whether it was discrimination or not. So I could see it both ways. I mean, like Gloria said, we had our personal story where we were actually approved. I could see it being the lack of financial literacy in the black community, because we're black and we know that it is. So I take it upon the community to say, hey guys, we got to make this better. Since 1968 to now, the gap is wider. I think as a community, we got to take that on to educate our community and our children.
Marvin, it just makes me wonder because Navy is a nonprofit and credit unions are nonprofits.
Right.
So they're about the community. They're supposed to be pouring into communities and building them up. With this being a largely spread problem, I think the Navy should do a better job of pouring into the Black community if they see that there's such a big gap.
Yes, I mean, I agree as well, but I look at it like as a community ourselves, when it comes to the Asians, Latinos, Native Americans, you know, white people have been educated and created education system. So I think we have to, as a community, educate ourselves, figure out where the weaknesses are and make them stronger.
Now, guys, this is just a personal opinion of Marvin and myself. So do your research, get out there and get financially literate and have a good understanding of what the requirements are. And we have other videos that talk about other great banks besides Navy Federal. Navy Federal is not the only amazing bank that's out there. We're sleeping on quite a few.
And remember, when you're going to buy a house, which is the single biggest investment most of us will actually buy, do your research. Figure out 3 different institutions that you can apply for and have a backup, just like Bob did. Fortunately, he was able to go somewhere else and still buy his dream house. We want you to buy your dream house too. And guess what, guys? We have other videos about other credit unions that you need to check out next. And look at this next video. I'm Mr. Smith.
And I'm Mrs. Smith.
And we're here to help empower your finances.